Okay, we're back. This is part 3. And so we're continuing with Russia. And I was talking about the patterns on her face, which we're going to see at another angle. But first I want to notice in this profile, long nose and the hair with bangs, looks like, and then the patterned hair coming down through the back. I'm going to look at her here in a close-up. And this is a different figurine from the same site. But this is interesting marking here along the side of face, almost like she's wearing ear flaps. I don't know. And kind of a receding chin, but definitely strongly marked face. Here's another one where you've got, again, the patterning going not only over the hair but over the entire face. And so maybe also an indication of symbolism of the animal mother, which we see also on this image, the patterned face. This is one we've seen in some of the other pictures. I'm repeating some of these just to get different angles of view on them. Hands to the center of the body. And here are some, obviously fragmentary. This is clay trying to hold the whole piece together. Very strong bust on this one, kind of a skirted bottom, a little bit of a face there. Here's the side view. This kind of reminds me of some of the Cretan figurines, even down to the little cap she seems to be wearing. And then here are some of the, with the knob-like head, hands down to the center of the body. I especially like this image here, which reminds me so much of, I don't know, girls I knew in high school, just something about a natural human body, a natural female body, just relaxed, present in her body. These have been evaluated as representing birds in the shape, kind of wing-like formations. It does look like a breast here, though, and maybe even a vulva, although I can't tell if this is front or back. It's pretty abstract. And then Gagarino, which is in Ukraine, and this is another one that may be part of this string skirt series. So here we've got across the front this kind of like lines, maybe indicating strings or fringes, and you can see it in profile here underneath this, under her breasts. And you don't see it really continuing around the back. So it's interesting because we're usually shown it either all the way in the front or all the way in the back, but it would have been tied off. And we don't really have a back view to see if that's the case here. But again, kind of an elongated head. A different side view of it here. And this is also from Gagarino, where you've got the patterning of hair or cap on the head, very knob-like head, although maybe this is a face here, and the large breasts and belly. And here's another one which is really unique because like that one we saw from Frassassi in Italy at the very beginning in part 1, you've got the arms raised, and they call her the praying woman, just based on the hand stance, but it does seem like somewhat of an invocational posture. You could call it a yogic posture, I suppose, a meditative one. And then these, much more following the line of the ivory, just very elongated, strongly detailed vulva there, appears to be armless, kind of knob-headed. And you can see how the carving of them was done in this example. And this was found partly carved, apparently, where you have head-to-head figures that, would have probably then been separated. And so this artist has shown, how you have a woman going in this direction, a male figure going in that direction with phallic ending on it. These male figures are really outside pattern overall. The concentration is on the females, but you do have apparently some. And there's some others which are ungendered. And there's been a lot of interesting discussion about this and the arguments about whether these are divine females or not. And people pointing out, well, a lot of them are ungendered, so, men were there too. And my book, ungendered does not equal necessarily to male. Or if they are, not sexed as male, what does that say about the kind of society that, you have females and ungendered as the basic archetypes? Here, this 2 pieces from Mainz in western Germany. Here's another one, very smooth, rounded surfaces. Again, working from a stone shape, I'm guessing that was natural and then enhanced for buttocks and breasts, from Trasimeno in Italy. And the Italian ones are really overlooked. There's some very interesting finds there. Parabita here in the southern area of Italy with this sort of mask-like looking face, the eyes looking very mysterious here, and that same symbolism of the arms looped all the way around the belly that we've seen both in Western Europe and in Malta and Siberia. This is another from a group of finds at that same site. This was just only recently discovered, and this is where we really find ourselves in this process of uncovering these societies, is that sites are still being found. And we still don't know yet what might be found in Africa or other parts of the world. But this is obviously broken and not in really great shape, but you can see the breasts and butt. Oh, now cool. And here's another one that I hadn't seen before until recently. This is a site we're going to see a little later on at Rocco Sorcier. And this is, again, the almost vestigial head that we've seen on a few of these, including at Hohlefels in Germany, and then arms through the center and large round legs and vulva. Bras-en-Puy is one of the very older sites, and don't ask me why I have it so late in the show, but it is this head of a young-looking woman, and there again we have this perplex. This looks a lot to me like Egyptian braids. You know, the way that they've done the hair. They seem to be indicating that it's very curly or else it's braided. You can see that again from the back. Some people theorize that this is a hood. If so, it's a woven hood. You know, could have been woven, I suppose, out of mammoth ivory. And also at Bras-en-Puy is this dagger handle, and you've got this very protuberant egg-like belly that we've seen on a lot of the Western European figurines. I have a color picture of it here where you can just see how sweetly the lower back, the small of the back, is carved as it swoops out to form her buttocks. And I see very similar carvings like this, well, not carvings, but ceramic moldings from Sesklo culture in the Balkans many, many thousands of years later. So we get into some of the abstractions as we get into the later Paleolithic. In the Magdalenian period, you start to see really highly abstracted figures. They lose a lot of the large breasts, and the symbolism much more goes to big butts. And this is one of the examples that I was referring to where you might have a co-gendering going on because the legs terminate, and it almost looks like this is a penis. She's got a very abstract head with a cap. We're going to see a couple of examples of those caps. Here's another one. From Switzerland at Neuchâtel. Here's a side view showing how this can, sit on its own. And you've got her profile there. And again, the legs in profile, this whole lower part of the body could be taken as a co-gendering, which we see a lot in certain parts of the world in the Neolithic, more so than in the Paleolithic. Here's another piece out of calcite stone from Soleil. And very smooth body. The head is mostly missing, arms around to the center, and the legs are drawn up and very much in reduced form in a way that we see in South Pacific sculpture and African sculpture. That they're kind of telescoped. Really, the emphasis is on the torso more so than on the legs. These are other views of that same figure. So now we see her from the front with her hands facing forward, and they've been broken over time. And she's kneeling. When we look at it from below, this kneeling legs turns into a vulva, very large symbolic vulva. And then from the back, you see a little trace of what was probably the head slightly rocked backwards. Chulsak, completely abstract, but also with those same abbreviated legs and a very pregnant belly. No arms, head, breasts at all, carved out of a luminous stone. And then here, that same symbolism comes over in Switzerland, where you start to see here and going over into Germany, carved out of jet. And they have been making by this time for over close to 20,000 years stone and ivory figurines of women. And so it seems like this move to abstraction, it was almost like jazz. They began to work with the forms in new ways. And it's the same symbolism, but it's being expressed differently, in these very abstract forms, and especially focusing on the lower body and the buttocks. And so you see a lot in this form. These were amulets. You can see a lot of them have holes for hanging them as pendants. So here's Peter Fels in Germany, and we're going to see some other examples, I think, further along. Here's another of that same kind of abstract woman with emphasis on buttocks. On the top is almost like a tooth, and you've got, this is a famous one, you usually see drawings of her sort of spread out so you can see all the patterning that was done across her, and a vulva, I think, in the front, which I don't have the front view here. But this cultural horizon was given a name, where you've got these figurines and also, as we're going to see, etched petroglyphs in the shape, silhouettes of a woman, where here you've got the breasts, but the main theme being the buttocks and then the torso of a woman. And so this is known as the Lalin-Gunnersdorf culture, after two of the sites that were, they gave the name to it, and Lalin in France and Gunnersdorf in Germany. So this is spread over quite a wide area. It actually extends over into Poland, as we're going to see some examples later. And so just, again, highly, highly abstract. Some of these, without seeing them as part of this overall pattern, and especially when we look at the etchings, you wouldn't even necessarily know that this was a human figure, much less a female figure. But what happens, and here we're in Poland, Wilczyce, we have both stone figures, like we've been looking at, and also napped flints that were made in these same patterns. I'm going to go over to a better view of those. Here are some examples of the flints. So we have various media, whether you've got either chipping of flint, or you've got carving of stone, or you have etching or engraving into stone in the forms like this. And this is actually the site of Gunnersdorf, where you've got the silhouettes of 4 women, maybe 5, I'm not sure, but I guess that is a 5th, in profile, moving along, and you have these line patterns on this one, which have been drawn into the figures. And these may be ceremonial acts. The additions of lines or slashes is something we're going to see other examples of, that we have basically the images of these women and then engravings made on them. And here's an example actually from Lalinde, where you've got markings right over the area where the womb would be, or the vulva. And this one has actually been drilled out as well. And so one idea is that these could have been used in ceremonies either of conception or contraception, just closing the womb perhaps as well as opening it. And so that's one idea. I mean, there's some kind of meaning to these slash marks that are being made. But you can see here clearly how these same profiles are repeated in petroglyphs. And here's another example. And here again we have the paired woman in really almost a lesbian. I mean, why do I say almost? Women together, embracing, body to body. Something you don't often see in world art, not as often as it was happening. Cusack and Dordogne, here's more silhouettes, kind of along those lines, but much more emphasis on the breasts. And a lot of these look like the bodies of mature women. Here's another example, and this is, again, a carved bone from the Pyrenees and from a cave at Usteritz. And you can see the combination of large, stocky-bodied women with the bison. And these look like they might be arrows, so there might be some hunting magic going on here. But there's also the connection of the animal and the woman that I've been referring to here. And this looks to me like ceremonial acts. They're shown with their arms raised in that invocatory gesture. They're also shown, and this is not the only example, with hairy bodies, not just around the vulva, but there are markings that indicate perhaps fur on the body. This may even be the ridge of an animal spine along the back. They're wearing necklaces and bracelets. They're looking up, at least this one, who we can see the face of, is looking up. And so that's that linkage again of the animal with woman. Here at Tolentino in eastern Italy, she has an animal head. Very clear female body, apparent dance or ritual gesture, arms crossed over her belly. And, this has been interpreted by Susan Hawthorne as a wolf head, and I see it much more as some kind of grazing animal, just the shape of the head and of the jaw and of the ear as well. But be that as it may, it is an animal woman, and you've got more animals here on the back. And this was used as a pounding tool. There's a lot of marks you can see here on the drawing, also on the photo, that this was being used as some kind of a hammer or mortar. But it's interesting to see these linear patterns, again, incised. I think this is deliberate ceremonial acts rather than just the result of this pounding. And you can see it very clearly here. Again, the pattern of lines over the womb, over the pubic triangle. Abri Patot in France, and abri means a rock shelter. So we have a lot of rock overhangs that were used both as ceremonial sites and also as camping places. They were literally shelters. And so we have a pebble, I don't know how large this is, engraved with the same form that we've been looking at of these ancestral women. And, just all different kinds of media are being used. I mean, stones being used in different ways. Here it is on a relief inside a cave at Orco-Sorcier, and I was referring to this earlier on. We saw it in the round figurine. This is actually 3 figures, I don't have them all in this show, with very strongly marked vulvas, of younger-looking women. And so the vulva signs. And there's a lot of petroglyphs all over the world. This is from Ucknitz, which again goes back to that Lawin-Gunnersdorf time period. But they're also found at much older levels of the Paleolithic. And you'll see different forms. The last one is very triangular, and this one is more rounded. But we've got vulva stones sometimes combined. One side has vulvas, and the other side has animal heads or other representations of animals. And so vulvas engraved on the stone is something that is a worldwide pattern. It's not unique by any means to Europe, although we see it at this early period here. We have engravings of vulvas that are at least as old and possibly far, far older in Australia at places like Carnarvon Gorge in the western part of Queensland. They're found in Africa. All continents have these. They're a really archaic sign of female power. And when so many scholars have gone on for such a long time talking about phallic symbols, they don't really have a word for these. And, one feminist scholars came up with this term of Venus envy to talk about the fact that, there's this ignoring and this minimizing of the vital power, the vital creative power of the female, of the portals of birth, the place of sexual ecstasy. All of that is going on here. And so this rock may have even had vulvas added to it at different times. And we see examples both of the oval shapes and also the more triangular vulval forms going on here, almost like they're emerging out of the rock. You'll also see vulva symbolism in some of the ceremonial wands, and that's what I'm looking at here. Well, you can see different views of this is all the same image, but here's a real strong close-up, along with beautiful carving on bone that, to me, is very evocative in this particular example of art from Melanesia and the southwestern Pacific. So you see a lot of the same kind of symbolic patterns arising independently. Spirals, of course, you see all over the world, but there's a little bit of glimpse into the symbolic world. And these bones certainly had some kind of ceremonial uses, but what was it? There's also some bones that had been originally theorized as being bâtons de commandement, bones of leadership or of mastership by some archaeologists. And these openings here seem to have been used either as atlatls or possibly in other uses of weapons. But what's interesting about them is the view into the animal world, which is really clear going on here, and we see sea mammals and serpents, in some cases eels, horses, and other creatures, as well as vulvas also being engraved on here. Here's an example where you have the actual female iconography that we've been looking at as in the round figurines also being engraved on bone. And this is an example with a very prominent vulva, but the same kind of legs together stance that we've seen from the older icons, and even the very tiny head on this one answers to some of the ones we've looked at. Another rock shelter bone. Here's one from Germany at Petersfels again, and you've got, they've etched in waist, breasts, hips, so making a female form out of the bone. And this is such an important find. Here you're seeing it spread out. It's actually, folded over, the shape of maybe of a rib. But you've got a woman carrying a staff, surrounded by horses. You've got an eel here. There are other markings which were possibly calendrical, possibly ceremonial markings. We don't really know their meaning any longer. But here's a close-up of the woman. You see this very deep breast and belly. This is big hips, small shoulders. This is definitely a female form with that same kind of upturned head we've been seeing in the icons. And she's got one of these batons, or these wands, over her shoulder, which we see repeated here in this scene from Des Avis, also on another piece of bone. Looks like they might be walking through a forest. These are supposed to be trees. And so that's just another reminder that the jump to assume a masculine default in leadership, ceremonial leadership, is really a cultural bias that has to be overcome, because these are ungendered figures. We don't really know. But we have to consider many possibilities in looking at these. So that's what I have for you. Is part of a series I'm going to be doing of open source webcasts. And you can follow this on my Press Histories website as I schedule them. Look on the events page, or better yet, visit this Press Histories page on Facebook. And that is where I post daily. There's an ongoing blog there with a lot of images and commentary. You can also see the trailers for my DVD, Woman Shaman the Ancients, which is up at suppresshistories.net. And you can order the DVD as well. It's a 2-disc set that's actually 3 hours of material on ancient women's spiritual leadership, and especially in the ecstatic realm. I'm just concluding in May of 2015 the current course. You can subscribe month by month. It's a subscription course, and I'll be adding new courses later on this year and in the future. So those can be accessed from either of these websites here, and as well as posters that I've done on the vulva stones, on ceremonial pots in the shape of women's breasts. What else do I have? Sacra vulva, and a poster on female icons, ancestral mothers, which include some of the images that you're looking at in this show, as well as many others from a much more global perspective. So I invite you to visit all those resources.